At 14,000 feet, the radios went silent. No command updates, no satellite feed. Just the sound of men dying in the dust below. And in that moment, somewhere above the battlefield, a single Warthog turned west, without clearance, without backup, and without saying a word. You're watching the Storyscape, where silent heroes walk through fire, and some never leave a name behind. Where the quiet ones often carry the loudest pasts. Tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. The briefing had lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes to outline what would become one of the most disastrous extractions in the Western theater. At the command outpost tucked into a windswept plateau in northern Syria, the SEAL unit known as Echo 9 had been prepping for a high-value retrieval op. The target, a foreign weapons engineer coordinating drone strikes from a remote village compound. The goal was clean: seize, extract, and disappear. The window was small, no room for delays, no time for backup. That's how these missions usually went. And the generals, behind their digital walls and map overlays, had full confidence in the plan. Echo 9 would land under low visibility, retrieve the asset, and be out before sunrise. Air support was unnecessary unless compromised. Everyone nodded. But 23 minutes into the operation, things fell apart. The first sign came through thermal footage: 2 heat blooms on the east ridge, then 4 more in tight formation. Not villagers, not even local militias. These were trained, outfitted, and positioned. No random insurgents moved like that. Then the jamming started. Comms to HQ dropped into static. Echo 9's satellite uplink went dark. A no-fly zone had been electronically painted over their airspace, but no one had filed it. Someone had expected them. Commander Briggs, a seasoned SEAL with 5 deployments under his belt, recognized the trap 5 seconds too late. By then, 2 of his men were already pinned down behind a mud brick wall. Another was bleeding from a leg wound, and mortar rounds were beginning to walk their way closer. Every path in or out of the compound was covered. Briggs barked into his radio. "Command, this is Echo 9. We're compromised. Request immediate CAS." But only static came back. He switched to backup frequencies. Nothing. He turned to their forward controller, Petty Officer Langston. "Hit the emergency burst." Langston hesitated. That signal wasn't for routine help. It was only triggered when the mission had collapsed beyond all recovery, when survival depended on something or someone far above them. Briggs didn't wait. He slammed the red button himself. Miles away, inside a buried command node, the signal lit up on a secure feed marked Priority Black.
The transmission only included coordinates, altitude, and the classification Hostile Field. No eyes. Full denial requested. Translated, they were asking for a ghost. At that moment, somewhere far east, under the open skies of Jordanian airspace, an A-10 Thunderbolt II banked sharply over a ridge. Its engines, already rumbling with restrained power, flared as the pilot adjusted course without a word. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elise Monroe checked the coordinates, flicked her targeting system online, and silenced the radio. She didn't wait for permission. Back in the valley, the SEALs were running out of time. The wounded were being pulled into improvised cover. Return fire was scattered, the enemy hidden in elevated positions with suppressing fire. And worst of all, they were being herded, slowly pushed into a narrow ravine with no cover and no exit. "Briggs!" Langston yelled. "If we don't get support in 60 seconds, we're boxed!" Briggs didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the smoke trails now creeping in from the west. Mortars were shifting. Then, a low sound. A vibration, more felt than heard, trembled through the stone. It was like thunder wrapped in steel. Herrera, the team's spotter, glanced up first. That doesn't sound like artillery. Briggs followed his gaze. And there, slicing across the clouds with the grace of a predator bird, came the dark, unmistakable outline of a warthog. But no call came through the radio, no danger close warning, no altitude reports, no pilot name. She just arrived. The first burst from the Avenger cannon split the air with a mechanical growl unlike anything man or nature could produce. It wasn't gunfire. It was a statement. A scalpel of destruction tore through the ridgeline above them. The mortar position vanished in a plume of smoke and bodies. Gasps came from the SEALs as dust rained down around them. "Did you call that in?" Herrera shouted. Briggs just shook his head. No one did. The Warthog didn't linger on the pass. It looped wide, the shark mouth on its nose flashing once before disappearing behind the clouds again. Then another growl, another precise strike. A hillside machine gun nest lit up and exploded. Still no contact, still no confirmation, only fire and steel. Captain Monroe didn't see herself as a hero. She wasn't there for medals. She wasn't even on the original dispatch. Her Warthog had been scheduled for diagnostics. But she had ignored that too. When the signal came through, she moved. Because when the generals called for airstrike, she already knew what had to be done. Captain Elise Monroe wasn't a name most people in the theater recognized.
She preferred it that way. For 6 years, she'd flown under various call signs, mostly temporary, often unrecorded. Angel 2, Blizzard, Ghost Viper. Names whispered through encrypted channels when a mission turned south and no one else could get there in time. She didn't ask questions. She didn't wait for clearance. She flew. The Warthog wasn't fast. It didn't look like much from a distance. Short wings, fat belly, heavy frame, but that was the point. It didn't need to impress. It needed to survive. And in Elise's hands, it became something more than metal and rivets. It became an extension of her instincts. As the first pass scorched the mortar team, Elise banked into the sun, scanning the ridgeline for follow-up threats. The smoke from her last strike hadn't even cleared when her targeting pod caught movement. 2 heat trails sprinting west through the brush, likely scouts repositioning to adjust fire. She didn't speak. She didn't call it in. She just rolled left, dropped the nose, and fired. Tracer rounds carved through the slope, shredding earth and heat signatures in perfect tandem. One burst, then silence. Down below, the SEALs moved again, this time not out of desperation, but with purpose. Cover fire came from above now, and with surgical timing. The Warthog didn't blanket the field. It didn't carpet bomb. It carved. Clean, sharp, calculated. Someone was watching, not guessing. And whoever it was saw everything. Langston ducked behind a collapsed archway and keyed his comms again. Echo 9 to Angel 2. Do you copy? Nothing. Only the distant sound of engines rumbling like a heartbeat above the chaos. Briggs crouched beside him. She's not gonna answer, Lang. She's not here to talk. Langston glanced up at the sky, incredulous. Then how the hell does she know where to strike? Herrera chuckled, wiping blood from his temple. Maybe she's reading our minds. Briggs didn't laugh. He was too focused on the pattern. Every time they shifted, she adjusted. Every direction they moved, she mirrored from the air. There was no delay, no missed cues, just perfect response. Up in the cockpit, Elise flipped her FLIR overlay again, scanning the western cliffside. The image flickered. 4 bodies crouched behind a vehicle, hidden beneath thermal tarps, heat suppression gear. Someone had trained them well. She narrowed her eyes. They were preparing a counterattack. She didn't hesitate. 2 clicks, 1 flare, then she banked wide and unleashed a burst that tore through tarp, truck, and men before any of them could lift their weapons. A cloud of flame rose up,
visible even to the SEALs now moving past his second ridge. Briggs watched the blast, then turned to his team. "Change of plan. We cut north through the waterline. She's clearing the cliffs."
"Did command say that?" Herrera asked. "No," Briggs replied, "but she did." Back in the air, Elise adjusted her altitude, dropping lower into the canyon mouth. She could feel the pressure building in her arms and chest, but she didn't flinch. Flying this low meant early warning systems were useless. Trees, terrain, stone walls, all obstacles she had to track manually. But she'd trained for that, trained to live in the dead zones where no other aircraft could go. She glanced at her ammo readout, down to 41% on the GAU-8, enough for 3, maybe 4 more passes. She checked fuel. It wasn't critical yet, but she was pushing close. Returning to base would be dicey, but none of that mattered, not until the team was out. The screen pinged again. New heat source. 2 figures sprinting down a goat path from the northeast, not part of the main assault group. Elise toggled magnification. RPG slung over one shoulder, targeting optics in hand. She tapped the cannon. One short burst, nothing wasteful. The path exploded in a flash of dust and heat. Only silence followed. She looped. Below, Echo 9 moved fast now, clearing corners, sweeping alleys, retaking ground inch by inch. And always the shadow above them circled. Never speaking, never seen, but present. "She's got eyes we don't," Langston muttered. Herrera nodded. "She doesn't just fly that plane, she becomes it." The Warthog swept overhead again, engines howling low, a hunting song above the smoke. Back at Central Command, chaos reigned. Screens flickered. No drone feeds, no uplinks. The general staff were scrambling to pinpoint Echo 9's position. One comms officer finally raised a hand. "Sir, we've got traces of an A-10 in the engagement zone. No flight plan, no ID." "Who's flying it?" "We don't know. There's no radio log, no transponder ping." The general frowned. "Then how the hell is it striking our targets?" Silence. Finally, an intel tech whispered, "We didn't send it, but it's saving them." Back in the valley, Elise slowed her speed, angling for one final sweep before repositioning. As she leveled out, her HUD flashed. An infrared marker pulsed from a nearby shack, a buried heat source, steady, low to the ground, unmoving. Could be a survivor, could be a trap. She narrowed her eyes and banked again, watching for movement. Nothing. No enemy fire, no flash, just the faint pulse. She marked it, flagged it. That would be the last sweep. She couldn't afford a misread, but she also couldn't let it go unchecked. She dove. The cannon spun. One burst, half a second. The building erupted inward. If there had been a threat, it wasn't anymore. Elise climbed. Down below, Briggs gave the extraction signal. "We move now. North path. Watch the ridge. She's got our 6.
Langston glanced upward again. "Do we even know who she is?" Briggs shook his head. "No, but if we make it out of here, we're writing her name in ink." The extraction zone wasn't ideal. From the beginning, Command had marked it as acceptable under pressure, which meant nothing about it was good. A flat patch of terrain surrounded by natural rises, exposed on all sides, with only a dried-out stream bed offering partial cover from the western slope. If there had been another option, they would have taken it. But this was where the birds could land, and right now the only thing Echo 9 wanted more than a clean shot was a way home. Briggs led the team through the smoking remnants of what had once been an orchard, now a scorched shell of branches and ash. Every corner, every alley had been cleared not by rifle or grenade, but by the unflinching precision of the Warthog circling above. The longer they moved, the more obvious it became. This pilot wasn't just following them, she was anticipating them. Clearing paths seconds before they reached them, spotting flanking threats they hadn't even detected. No calls, no commands, just the rhythmic descent and roar of a 30mm cannon speaking in their place. Elise had not spoken a word since she launched. Not to air control, not to command, not even to the crew that had hastily armed her bird when the emergency ping lit up. She had received the coordinates, climbed into the cockpit, and let her instincts do the rest. And now those instincts told her the operation wasn't over. The enemy had regrouped. The scattered resistance wasn't acting random anymore. It was tightening, changing pattern. Elise adjusted altitude and dropped back into a low orbit. Her eyes scanned the terrain in infrared, searching for heat trails that didn't move like locals or militia. What she saw confirmed her unease. 3 bodies, low against a southern ridge, moving in reverse formation. That wasn't a retreat. That was an ambush. She didn't hesitate. A wide bank-in turn gave her the angle she needed, and with a squeeze of the trigger, the Avenger cannon barked. Dust erupted from the ridge. A beat passed. Then 2 more figures bolted from the opposite side, delayed, likely coordinating the trap. She followed. Another precise burst dropped both before they reached cover. Below, Echo 9 was already pushing forward. Their boots moved over rubble with new certainty. They didn't know her name, but they trusted her shadow. Inside the cockpit, Elise's left hand hovered over the fuel indicator. She was approaching her red line. Less than 20% remained. Under normal protocol, this was the point to disengage, report back, and begin refueling logistics. But Elise had never been interested in protocol.
Her mission wasn't over until the team was gone, every one of them. Briggs reached the final checkpoint first, a rusted-out husk of a transport vehicle that had once been a UN convoy. It now marked the eastern edge of the landing zone. The valley opened beyond, dry, flat, and vulnerable. "We wait here," he said, kneeling behind the side panels. "Birds inbound in 6. Herrera dropped beside him, scanning the tree line through his scope. "If I were them, I'd hit us right here." Briggs nodded. "Yeah, which is why she's still up there." The Warthog returned in another loop. This time, it didn't fire. It didn't need to. Its presence alone held back the unknown. The valley seemed to hold its breath every time the engines passed overhead. Elise flipped her sensor range to maximum sweep. The picture looked mostly clean, but one sector, just beyond a collapsed irrigation trench, showed an odd thermal signature. Not hot enough to be an active vehicle, but not ambient either. She marked it and zoomed in. There, half buried beneath brush and crumbled stone, sat a technical truck, covered in a camouflage net, nose angled directly at the extraction point. It hadn't moved since her first pass. Now she understood why. A gunner crouched behind it, waiting for the rotor wash of the inbound helo, and beside him, 2 more fighters, one with an RPG. Elise dropped flares to distract any possible AA tracking, then dove without a single transmission. The angle was steep, the window tight. A misfire could put shrapnel dangerously close to the seals. But she didn't miss. A precision-guided rocket left her wing with barely a ripple. 3 seconds later, the truck erupted. The sound wave rolled down the valley, followed by the thump of her engines pulling back into climb. Ground teams scattered for cover, but no rounds hit them, only dust and heat. From his cover, Briggs rose, staring at the black smoke curling skyward. That was the last gunner. Had to be. Herrera exhaled. "She's flying Overwatch like it's a dance, every pass timed to us." Elise remained silent. Her display now showed only fragments of movement, stray survivors fleeing into distant hills. No active threats. But she didn't relax. She never did. The mission wasn't just about elimination. It was about vigilance, about covering the ones who couldn't see what she saw. She glanced toward her fuel levels again. 14%.
enough for one last sweep before heading to outpost Kilo 5. If she timed it right, she could land with fumes. If she didn't, well, the bird would glide as far as it could. Down below, the SEALs heard the inbound rotor thump echoing across the valley. Their ride was on time. Briggs tapped his comm. Bird in 5. All units move.
The squad fanned out across the landing zone, establishing a perimeter. But their eyes weren't just on the tree line. They kept looking up, and the sky kept circling. From the moment Elise had first gripped the throttle that morning, she'd known she wasn't flying a normal sortie. Warthog pilots didn't get summoned on ghost pings, not unless things had gone so catastrophically wrong that command couldn't admit it happened. And now, as she circled above the smoking valley, her suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't just a mission gone sideways. It was a cleanup job for something higher-ups didn't want on the books. On the ground, Echo 9 had regrouped near the extraction point, eyes wide and weapons steady. The landing zone was too open, the terrain too quiet. And quiet out here didn't mean safety. It meant setup. A minute ago, the valley was chaos. Now, the silence screamed louder than gunfire. And it was that silence Elise was listening to. She flipped her HUD display again and widened the electromagnetic filter. One blip, far off, almost insignificant, but she didn't believe in coincidences. The source sat nestled between two ridges just beyond line of sight from the LZ. From altitude, it looked like nothing. Maybe a generator, maybe metal scrap. But a second glance showed the pattern. It pulsed, not rhythmically like a machine, strategically. A comms beacon, buried. Inside the cockpit, Elise steadied her breath. If someone had laid that beacon there, they weren't just tracking the SEALs. They were feeding live coordinates to something else, someone else outside the region. That meant extraction wasn't the end. It was bait. She turned the Warthog toward the signal. Below, Briggs had noticed the aircraft's change in path. "Why's she veering north?" Herrera asked. "She sees something we don't," Briggs muttered, scanning the ridge with his scope. And then he saw it. Just a flicker, a shimmer of heat reflecting off a scope lens behind a rock formation. He exhaled hard. Sniper. Northwest incline. She's ahead of him. By the time the sniper even adjusted his aim, Elise was already in a dive. She came in from the east, using the terrain as cover. At this range, the sound of her approach was delayed. By the time the man looked up, it was too late. The cannon barked. The ridge evaporated. The sniper, the comms beacon, the lookout station, gone in one coordinated burst. She banked hard and looped again. Inside the Warthog, warning lights flickered, fuel levels dropping into the danger zone. She was now running under 10%. Her nav system started calculating emergency landing options, but she dismissed it. Not yet. Back at command, the general staff had finally patched a partial uplink into the feed from Echo 9. The imagery was fragmented. Helmet cam flickers, infrared residue from thermal sights, and scattered audio of breath and grit and gunfire. But the one constant was her, the black Warthog. No call sign, no chatter, just presence. "Do we know who authorized the strike?" one officer asked. "We didn't," came the reply. "There's no order on file, no asset assigned to the airspace." "Then who the hell is flying that jet?" Silence. Then someone from Intel said quietly, "Whoever she is, she's doing the job. We couldn't." Back in the valley, the SEALs began moving. The helicopter was 2 minutes out. Echo 9 fanned through the clearing,
securing sight lines and covering each other. They moved in near-perfect sync, but with the edge of people who had come seconds from death. They passed the remains of enemy vehicles, craters where machine gun nests once stood, and scorched stone walls now painted with smoke. Each ruin told the same story. Someone had been watching from above. Someone who didn't miss. Langston stopped at the edge of the clearing and turned his eyes skyward. "You think she's still up there?" Briggs nodded. "If we're still alive, she's still flying." He was right. Elise had taken one final orbit and was now circling tightly, watching not just the team, but the wider valley. Her HUD filtered through thermal bands, searching for anything out of place. Then she saw it, a cluster of cold objects under heat-shielding tarp near a half-collapsed barn, just within RPG range of the LZ. It didn't look like much, but a closer sweep showed human outlines, 2 of them, launchers, stationary, waiting. She didn't wait. The aircraft's targeting system locked instantly. One short burst arced across the valley. The barn exploded outward in a ball of flame. Debris flew in every direction. One of the RPGs launched mid-detonation, spiraling into a hillside. Harmless. The threat was gone. Briggs and Herrera dove for cover at the blast, then turned to look. They didn't have to guess. The SEALs gathered into final formation. Their ride came over the ridge, blades slicing through the smoke, descending fast. As the team boarded the helicopter, Briggs glanced back at the sky. The aircraft was just a silhouette now, veiled in fading sunlight. Herrera stepped up beside him. "What do we call her?" He didn't look away. The one who didn't wait for orders. The rotor wash picked up. Echo 9 rose into the air. Above them, the Warthog flew, a wide arc. Not too low, not too loud, just enough to be seen.
One last pass. Then it vanished behind the mountain wall, leaving nothing but the lingering echo of engines and a battlefield turned to silence. Outpost Kilo 5 sat like a rusted scar on the edge of the desert. Nothing more than a refueling station and comms relay disguised as an unimportant blip on military maps. There were no press conferences here, no ribbons, just sun-scorched hangars, fuel drums, and dust that clung to skin like guilt. The Warthog came in low, flaps extended, engines strained to their final breath. Elise nursed the bird down with the kind of care that didn't come from manuals or simulators, but from hours spent over fire zones where every landing felt borrowed. As the wheels kissed the dirt strip, the aircraft bounced once, just enough to rattle bolts and remind everyone she'd pushed it past protocol again. When it finally settled, the brakes groaned in relief. Ground crew scrambled, not out of panic, out of respect. They had seen this before. The canopy popped, Elise removed her helmet, unfastened her harness, and climbed down without flourish. Her face was pale beneath a layer of sand, lips cracked from dry oxygen, and her boots hit the tarmac with a hollow sound that said more than any mission report ever could. A crew chief jogged over. "Ma'am? Command's requesting a debrief immediately. They sent a chopper." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on the nose of her aircraft, the painted shark mouth, streaked with soot and bug splatter, still grinning through it all. Finally, she nodded. "How long till the bird gets here?" 15, maybe 20. "Good," she said. "Tell them I'll be ready." She walked to the operations tent alone, boots crunching over sun-baked gravel. Inside, the portable AC unit wheezed with exhaustion. A stack of flight logs sat untouched on the desk beside her. She dropped hers on top, unsigned.
Across the desert, at the main regional command post, the air felt entirely different. Tension pulsed through the sterile war room, where officers in starch-stiff uniforms gathered around projection screens. The first decrypted satellite feed had just come in, partial footage of Echo 9's retreat. Aerial sweeps showed burned-out enemy positions, collapsed sniper nests, vaporized vehicles. Too clean, too fast, too precise. One colonel leaned in. "There's no record of an A-10 dispatched to that sector." "I'm aware. And yet it's there, clearly." A general tapped his stylus on the screen, pausing the footage at the exact moment the Warthog carved a cliff face in half with a single cannon burst. "She doesn't call shots like a pilot. She thinks like ground." Another officer, younger, skeptical, asked, "So who authorized her?" "Apparently, no one."
Then she broke protocol. Maybe, or maybe she saw what we missed. Back at Outpost Kilo 5, Elise sat on a folding chair near the hangar, her posture straight despite the fatigue that coated her every muscle. She hadn't spoken since landing. Her mind was still in the valley, retracing flight paths, marking potential blind spots she might have missed. It was never about the victory. It was about the ones that could have slipped past her. A low rumble signaled the chopper's arrival. She stood, picked up her helmet, and walked toward the pad. By the time the rotors had slowed, an officer had already stepped out, hand raised for a half-hearted salute. "Captain Monroe, they're waiting on you." Of course they were. The debrief room was dim and dry, lit only by the cool glow of paused drone footage projected on the far wall. Seated inside were 4 men, 1 woman, all high clearance, all tight-lipped. None of them smiled. The senior officer gestured to the only empty chair. Elise remained standing. "Captain, you're aware that you were not assigned to the Echo 9 operation." "I am." "You responded to an unsanctioned emergency beacon with live ammunition, entered a black zone without comms clearance, and depleted all munitions without authorization." "I did." "Why?" She took a beat before answering. "Because they were going to die." The room was silent for a moment. Another officer, the one who had reviewed dozens of her past logs, leaned forward. "You've flown 15 unsanctioned missions this quarter alone, 12 with confirmed kills. Your fuel consumption is flagged. Your flight patterns show high-risk aggression, but your civilian casualty count remains at 0. How?" "I choose my shots. I fly low. I look twice." "You also disobey." "I move faster than permission." There was no challenge in her tone, no arrogance, just a cold clarity that came from having been there when bullets tore through silence and requests for clearance turned into eulogies. The lead officer opened a folder, slid a sheet across the table. It was a redeployment order. No medals, no citations, just coordinates, time, and another squad in need of air. "You'll receive no formal commendation." "I don't want one." "This operation never happened." "I wasn't there." He looked at her a moment longer, then nodded. As Elise turned to leave, the youngest officer finally spoke. "You flew under the call sign Angel 2, correct?" She paused. "That's what they gave me." Fitting. Back on the airstrip, the Warthog had already been rearmed. It waited quietly, nose pointed east, where another mission brewed on the horizon.
As she approached the ladder, the same crew chief from earlier appeared. "Ma'am," he said, "someone left this for you." It was a folded slip of paper tucked into the seat, a message scribbled hastily in grease pencil, clearly written mid-flight. "If we make it, we owe you a drink. If we don't, you were the last angel we ever saw. Echo 9. She folded the note, slid it into a pouch on her leg, and didn't say a word. The canopy closed, the engine hummed, and the Warthog, scarred and reborn, rolled down the strip again. 3 weeks later, a new recruit at SEAL Base Bravo sifted through a pile of torn after-action reports, looking for a pen that hadn't run dry. He flipped one folder open, scanned a few lines, and paused. There, on a heavily redacted mission log, was a single unclassified note scribbled in permanent ink. Support provided, A10, Angel 2. Status, unconfirmed. Communication, none. Result, 100% extraction. He leaned over to the older SEAL beside him, a man with graying hair, a shoulder brace, and a way of squinting that said he'd seen more than he'd told. "Who's Angel 2?" the recruit asked. The older man didn't answer first. He sipped his coffee, wiped a speck of oil from his knuckle, and stared at the paper like it might flinch. "She's the reason you're reading that file instead of someone reading your obituary," he said quietly. "Seriously, what unit is she with?" "She's not with anyone," he said. "She just shows up when no one else does. Flies low, never says a word." The recruit blinked. "So, she's not real?" "Oh, she's real," came a voice from across the room. Another SEAL, this one with a limp and a scar that ran from his collarbone to behind his ear, dropped a pack onto the bench. "Too damn real. She flew so low I could read the serial number on her wing. She saved us before we even called for help." They said nothing else. No medals, no mission footage, just smoke-stained memories and the sound of a cannon that arrived like a prophecy. Somewhere thousands of miles from the base, under a sky darker than ink, Elise Monroe flew over a jungle shrouded in rain. The Warthog rattled with the humidity, engines grinding against the saturated air. Beneath her, a team moved through hostile territory, pinned, surrounded, and jammed. Their comms were down. Drones had been grounded by lightning. No one knew they were out there, but she did. Her screen blinked once, a signal burst, a set of coordinates. She had already been circling for 6 minutes. The first strike came before the PIN squad even realized air support had arrived. A ridge erupted in a clean cut of fire, and then, like clockwork, the rain swallowed the sound. They looked up and saw only shadow. Some thought it was a hallucination.
Others just whispered the name, Angel 2. She never radioed in. She didn't have to. She never dropped flares unless they were needed. Her cannon spoke for her. Short bursts, precise, surgical. The kind of violence that felt less like rage and more like judgment. And when it was done, when the team had moved through the mud to the exfil point, the aircraft was already gone. No circle, no pass, just silence. In a dimly lit war planning room deep inside a mountain command facility, 2 analysts reviewed performance data. They had been tasked with tracking unexplained aerial precision strikes across 6 different ops over a 60-day window. All were off-book. All had resulted in full unit recovery. Collateral damage, near 0. Civilian casualties, none. Same strike pattern, the junior analyst said, pointing at a thermal snapshot of a collapsed ridgeline. But no aircraft ping, no black box data, just this one notation, Angel 2, no comms. "Who's flying her?" the senior one asked. "No idea. The name doesn't exist in any active deployment roster." The senior paused, then leaned back and said, "Maybe that's the point." He wrote something in the margin of the report. Recommended, silent commendation. Underneath it, in smaller letters, she never asked for credit, only Coordinates. One morning at dawn, long after her last recorded sortie, a field medic at a forward outpost found a folded note taped inside a medevac chopper. It was written on the back of an aircrew checklist and bore no signature, just 4 words. When it's bad, call. They passed the note up the chain. Some tried to trace it, others let it go. But from then on, whenever a black zone emergency came through and no official air support was close enough, someone would whisper, "Call Angel 2." Not everyone believed she was real. Some said she was an urban myth, a ghost of the sky, a made-up morale story. But the survivors knew better. You couldn't mistake the sound of her engines. You couldn't fake the timing of her strikes. And no one, not one of them, had ever seen her land. Back at Kilo 5, Elise sat alone beneath the wing of her Warthog as the sun broke over the cracked horizon. Her flight suit was still zipped, her gloves still on. She sipped lukewarm coffee from a battered thermos. The fuel crew walked past her without words, loading canisters and prepping gear. They didn't bother her. They knew her rhythm. In her flight logbook, she flipped to the back. A small envelope was taped inside, old, weathered. Inside it, the note from Echo 9, the one they left in the seat. If we make it, we owe you a drink. If we don't, you were the last angel we ever saw. She folded it back in, taped it tighter, and rose without a word. The Warthog was waiting.